Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Again, this is Joe Bradford, and I want to follow up with you about the posts that I've made in the last couple of days about suicide and suicide awareness. And I told you that I was going to tell you a little bit about why I'm doing this, and also some of the things that are planned for this project. So in addition to the articles that you have already seen on my website, I plan to put out some data that's based on surveys that I've taken from the Muslim community, that I have taken and then inshallah ta'ala will be taken in conjunction with specialists in the field to be able to analyze them and really drill down on the reasons why people hold this stigma about suicide. Now, one of the very first surveys that we put out was a simple one-word question, and some of you might even remember this survey. And when I sent it out, I got tons of messages from friends, basically saying, "Is everything okay? You know, is everything all right?" And everything is fine, alhamdulillah. But what we need to do is survey why Muslims feel certain ways about the topic of suicide, and why they do what they do, and why they treat people the way they treat them when there is a death in the family, much less a suicide. Death is awkward enough in itself. And so when there is any type of foul play or mental health issues or any type of hardship, it becomes that much more difficult for people to deal with. And so, I put out these surveys to basically say, okay, Muslims who commit suicide are, one-word answer. So I want to share some of those answers with you today and allow you to get a kind of a behind-the-scenes view of why this needs to be done. So, for example, very first response to Muslims who commit suicide are fasiq, sinful. Unfortunately, troubled Muslims. They are dead. They are, so really crass responses at times. Troubled, hurting. Not necessarily eternally damned. The product of pain and suffering. In need of help. They are usually mentally ill persons. They may be deeply disturbed. Now, this was a very common response, lacking faith. So, lacking faith. So, somehow there's this correlation that people think that if you are troubled in any way emotionally or mentally, that you somehow have weak faith. I hear this platitude all the time, and unfortunately many times from the minbar, people will say things like, a true Muslim can never be depressed. Really? I mean, it's as nonsensical as it is unfounded. And the reason why it's been difficult to tackle these ideas, and the reason why I put this survey out and started the articles and really tried to congeal all of the stuff that I've been doing behind the scenes and bring it to the public, is because in conversations with chaplains, with imams, with school counselors, with others who are working directly with Muslim students, they have all said that anytime there has been material produced that talks about an Islamic view of suicide, it almost always focuses on the issue of the legalities, like, do you pray janazah over them or not? And quite frankly, that needs to be covered. Or it's at the other extreme where it simply says, people who have suicidal ideation, you just have to instill them with hope. And hope in Arabic is ar-raja. And ar-raja in the Quran is mentioned in these many verses. And so we get a very, very bland, very non-specific way of addressing the topic. It's really it really does no good for the practitioner, and it certainly doesn't do any good for the person who is in need of help. So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, here's the concept of hope. All right, here's the concept of despair. Here's how you navigate that as a common Muslim. Here's how you navigate that as a practitioner. Here are the questions that you can ask someone that you can try to instill in hope. Because the thing with therapy that I've found is, while, cognitive distortions and the amendment of cognitive distortions is important, if there's no existential therapy that's related to it, if people are not drawn back to a higher power, a greater value system, something that they can look up to and look into, then by nature, what those cognitive distortions will come back. And so people will continue to despair because they have nothing to attach themselves to outside of themselves. And so what we need to do is we need research, we need procedures, we need material that can guide individuals as well as practitioners on how people can attach themselves to something outside of themselves. And that has to take a particularly religious bent when we're talking about Islam and Muslims. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. We shouldn't be ashamed to say that we have the material that can help people out of their times of trouble, that can address their spiritual maladies. Now, one of the obstacles and the hurdles to that has been that much of that material is extremely obtuse. It's extremely difficult to access and it's extremely difficult to understand. The other day I was reading a book by Jamaluddin al-Qasimi. He basically took Makki Abu Talib's Makki ibn Talib's book Qut al-Qulub and summarized it and shortened it. It's an abridgment. So you get to parts in that book where he talks about riyadat al-nafs and training the soul and things like that. And an educated person knowledgeable of the Arabic language and familiar with Islamic studies texts can barely make sense of it. So how much for a person who is just your average everyday Muslim or is a practitioner who's out there trying to counsel people, bring them informed content from their faith, but just doesn't find that it meets the needs. So these are some of the things, inshallah ta'ala, that we'll be doing on this project. There are a few people who have, alhamdulillah, reached out. And before the announcement, alhamdulillah, we had a few people lined up, specialists lined up. And now, alhamdulillah, after you all have been so generous, we've met about 20% of the goal on the launchgood. A lot of people have contacted and say, hey, how can I help? What can I do to help the project? And so that really pleases me. And this is not a short-term project. This is something that's going to be going on for the next year or so as we put everything together. And the survey results that I read to you, I'm going to actually we're putting those out into like an infographic, and we'll have those ready for people to really see the danger of flippancy on these issues, and how embodying rahmah, embodying mercy, and really showing care for people is what will be able to change their hearts and minds and allow them to get the help that they need. And inshallah ta'ala, that's the main goal of this project. So I just wanted to update you all. If you can, please go and donate generously. launchgood.com/suicide. And this will be producing this material. I'll be updating the LaunchGood page with some more information about the project, inshallah ta'ala, this evening. And inshallah ta'ala, keep an eye out for these updates online. And jazakallah khairan for all of your help. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.